Jam-packed agenda today, as always. So welcome to the May 8th meeting of the Oregon Public Health Advisory Board. I am Sarah as the acting chair. Let's all do an introduction in the chat today. If you want to put in your name, pronouns if you desire, and your organization. And our questions today are, how are you arriving in this meeting, and what do you hope to leave with today from our PHAB meeting? So we've got a lot on our agenda today about what PHAB is and what we do here. Rather than putting it in the chat, I'll say I'm Sarah Present. I'm health officer with Clackamas County. I'm the chair of PHAB this year, and I'm coming to this meeting curious and excited to have a really good conversation. And I hope to leave today thinking that some PHAB members feel more engaged. That's one of my goals for making you guys go through the whole charter with me. So that's one of the things on our agenda. We are also going to talk about, continue our discussion about public health modernization funding. Here are some legislative updates. Hear about the public or preventive health services block grant. And then for kind of PHAB member presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about syphilis. We're really thinking it's fun for this group to actually talk about some public health issues, how they're being addressed, a little less businessy and a little bit more around some issues that are affecting the health of our public in Oregon. So we're going to talk a bit about syphilis. So as a reminder, group agreements are on page 4 of the meeting packet, and our OHA team, if they have not already, will drop a link to the health equity policy and procedure in the chat. Okay, first order of business for us is a scheduling discussion. We have talked about trying to plan a retreat again for PHAB in this fall. I think that we are looking at maybe late September, potentially October or November. We, OHA may send out a survey around dates to see if there's anything that is clearly a no-go for people, or clear if we can find one of our regular meetings in October or November to extend for a full day PHAB retreat. But I'd love to open it up to all PHAB members and see if you have any thoughts about retreat planning for the fall, whether that be location or timing that would work really well if you have any suggestions.
Hey Sarah, this is Kelly Little. I joined late. I put myself in the chat though.
Hi, Kelly.
Hey, I like the November time that we did last year. I thought that was a good time for me anyway. The mid-November.
Okay, thank
I
you.
think Portland or Salem or Eugene.
Yeah, I
The
think,
more centrally located, the better, I think. But
yeah. Salem. Um, yeah, there's often a discussion around whether Portland is easiest for people with transportation options or if somewhere um, elsewhere in the state that's more central for shorter transportation times. So really would love to hear feedback. I think we're open to going anywhere.
yeah, Portland is more central for transportation. That is true. It is the same. It doesn't really matter to me. I come from Southern Oregon, so
Yeah,
I'm okay with either. Go ahead.
right. If it's going to be like mid-November or kind of in that time frame where weather could be an issue, I think Portland would be the option to have the chance of flying in versus driving over the passes. But that's just, I think I'm the only, well, Heather and I are the only ones from this side of the like from the Central Oregon area, but we would also be happy to host in Central Oregon. So if that would want to be an option, we could look at like October Um, and we'd be happy to host over here.
I think my issue if it was in the Central Oregon that I had childcare related matters. I can't just like if especially if it ends up being like an overnight thing. So if it was like a daytime thing, I might be able to do it, but I can't guarantee it just given my childcare needs on my.
Sorry, I muted myself. Yes, Jackie, I think that we heard you. Thank you. That Central Oregon or overnight is tough for those with childcare. And it sounds like most people, if we would, most people are on the western side of the Cascades, whether that be Eugene, Salem, Portland, could be a day trip potentially. Sarah, is this, we have ideas here? Any thoughts about October versus November other than weather? I know November comes up near like Thanksgiving holiday time, school break time,
Earlier November did also, is that when we did it last time? Early
early
mid-November
November.
did also seem to work pretty well. But I agree with weather concerns.
All right. Well, look out for a survey with some more details, and we'll try to get this set soon. All right. I'm going to turn it over to Naomi to provide updates on OHA and responses to federal policy changes and anything else. Naomi?
Hi, thank you, Sarah. I introduced myself in the chat, but I'll do it out loud too. My name is Naomi Adlin Biggs. I'm the OHA Public Health Director. I use she, her pronouns. Coming in curious, and as usual, I'm hoping to leave here inspired and energized. I typically leave PHAB pretty energized after the presentations and the conversations, so looking forward to that. So I'm going to provide some updates, well, federal changes updates. I just want to acknowledge that we're all pretty concerned, and I know partners are as well, about the future of public health, what the next federal funding cycle for public health will look like, how potential funding changes will affect programs, affect our partners, and our public health workforce in Oregon. And while we wish we could offer certainty, we are pretty much in a time of waiting with a lot of uncertainty, and it is pretty uncomfortable. There are some things that we know, and then there are lots of things that we don't know. And in general, the things we're waiting for are litigation outcomes, Congress negotiating and adopting the 2026 federal budget. And also we're waiting for a lot of formal communication about future funding streams. Some of our current funding streams are ending between now and the end of June. And we're still waiting on communication about funding from July 1 onwards. We at OHA remain committed to our values and our 2030 goal. We remain committed to sharing with you what we know, and we acknowledge that sometimes we may not know, and we will share what we don't know as well. I'll go through some of the updates that I have just to remind folks. I'll start with the epidemiology, laboratory capacity, immunization, behavioral health COVID grants. These are all the COVID-related or COVID-originated grants that were terminated back in end of March. And DOJ joined other states in lawsuit against HHS contesting these terminations. The judge at the time granted a temporary restraining order, and that restraining order is still in place. Although for some grants and contracts, with an abundance of caution, they are on pause right now. We're waiting for the judge to issue a ruling on a preliminary injunction that, if ordered, could basically continue the effects of the temporary restraining order and keep the funding flowing. And while a preliminary injunction would keep the ELC funding in place into 2026, 2027, some of the immunization COVID funding will be ending in June 30th. And these are funding that we knew were ending for some time now and have been planning for those. What we don't know is we still don't know when the judge will rule on this one. And we don't know whether we'll be able to rescind any of the stop work orders that we have right now on these grants. Let's see, we also have recently the AmeriCorps Vista grant was terminated. And the partnership agreement that OHA and the National AmeriCorps has was also ended. And what we know is that 7 AmeriCorps Vistas were put on administrative hold through May 19th by the National AmeriCorps. OHA or Oregon joined a lawsuit with other states regarding this termination. So a motion for preliminary injunction was filed on the 6th of May. But a ruling won't occur until after a hearing, and that will happen at the end or later this month. We don't know how or when the judge will rule on this, and we don't know what the steps or actions will be if a preliminary injunction is granted. We also have received a number of partial awards since December and January. And for some of these partial awards, we were told they were partially funded due to lack of a continuing resolution until mid-March. For some of these partial funds, we were verbally told that the remaining award will be forthcoming, but whether or when we will receive the remaining amounts at the moment, we don't know. We also expected a new notice of award for funding for the CDC tobacco funding on April 30th, and we did not receive one. CDC returned applications for funding starting April 30th for tobacco prevention to all state applicants with no explanation or indication that funding would be awarded in the future. The entire CDC Office on Smoking and Health was affected by the HHS reduction in force. The federal tobacco grants make up a portion of the Public Health Division's tobacco program funding. So the program has currently identified some funding to cover expenditures for the time being. I do also want to remind folks, I'm sure you've seen that the president released a budget proposal late last week, and it included significant proposed cuts to HHS agencies, eliminating some programs and moving some programs to a new administration for Healthy America. This is the start of the formal federal budget process. It's not the end of it. Congress ultimately negotiates and adopts the federal budget. They don't always consider the president's budget proposal, but they can. So at this point in time, we're waiting on Congress to see if they include some of the president's proposal in their appropriations negotiation. We don't know how long the budget negotiations will take, and if Congress will reach an agreement on a 2026 federal budget by October 1, which is the start of the federal fiscal year. We don't know if Congress will have to adopt a continuing resolution, which would presumably be based on the 2024 federal funding amounts. Or if Congress can't reach an agreement on October 1, basically, we're all waiting for Congress to see how that goes. So at the time being, we're doing a lot of monitoring and analysis of budgets that are at risk. We're doing a lot of coordination with DOJ, with Governor's Office to also explore our legal tools. And we're really in a point of uncertainty for so many things. I hope this was at least helpful for some of the information that we do have. Thank you. Back to you, Sarah.
Thanks, Nami. I appreciate it. Does anybody have any particular questions? Okay. Well, we really appreciate you giving that update and letting us know what we know about what's going on.
I have just a couple of questions. And if these are too broad, this is Mary Ingrove, and if these are too broad, don't worry about it. And I feel like I'm just trying to kind of, and also I will say, obviously nothing, right now I think we can all agree that probably everything is up in the air, and just because we haven't heard of it doesn't mean it's going to happen. But have you heard any updates on whether block grants are being considered? And then well, actually, I guess I have three questions. Do you want to just answer that one first, and then I'll go on to my other two?
I do not have any additional updates, and you're right, everything's up in the air, and things change fast as well. So the updates I'm giving is as of now,
Okay.
and could look different by the end of the week. And that's
Sure, absolutely. And then my second question is, I've read that for marketplace plans, that there's going to be increased scrutiny on verification of income tax, like salary, whatever, income tax verification for eligibility. Excuse me. Have you heard anything like that in the works for Medicaid, or has that not been brought up as an issue for Medicaid eligibility yet that you know of?
I don't know. I don't have this information.
Okay, no worries, no worries. And then my last question is, obviously we're all really worried about gender affirming care, and obviously reading a lot about that. Have you heard of any facilities in Oregon yet that are receiving any challenges or any concerning updates? That I'm just curious if there's anything you've heard on that we should be aware of.
So Mary, I'm gonna hand over to Dana. I think she may have some information on the block grant, and then I'm not sure about the Medicaid just because she represents Public Health Division in some of the OHA level conversations.
Okay, thank you so much.
Dana's around, right?
Yeah,
Mary?
I'm right here. So, hi, I'm Dana Drema, use she, her pronouns, and I'm the interim deputy director at the Public Health Division, and I represent Public Health Division on OHA's Federal Response and Planning team. I've not been in any conversations, Mary, about the any particular gender affirming care issues in clinics, but that doesn't necessarily mean there aren't any.
Sure.
But that's kind of what I'm not aware of anything, but that again, I might not be in those conversations. The one thing I want to say about block grants, so block grants they're good in that they often provide more flexibility, but I do think that sometimes in the past, when there have been conversations about moving public health funding to block grants, it often has meant that that would be a reduction in funding. So I think there's a sense that like they would lump a bunch of stuff together, provide a lot of flexibility, but provide less funding. And so I just want to caution about that, because I think, there are lots of great things about block grants because they are often very flexible, but I don't know that block grants are going to solve the problem. And so I just want to just sort of raise that for awareness.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that comment.
Yeah, I mean, they often have meant that those proposals have often meant a reduction. And I do think that there is likely appetite to put together some of the CDC funding that into like combining a bunch of a number of communicable disease things into one funding stream, that does concern me. And based on what we saw in the HHS leaked document, the passback document that came out in the media, you know, it's not like you can't see that they took all of those things and just added them all together and put them in a, you know, we're going to put them in a new line item at that level.
Okay.
So,
That's
yeah.
very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, we would love block grants for the flexibility, but it's often been a way in the past, been a way to sort of try to float reductions.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's my observation.
I agree. Thank you so much.
Any other questions for Naomi or Dana? Okay. Thank you guys for that information again. Okay, we are going to move into our update of the PHAB charter. So we've had a charter and bylaws work group that has met a couple of times to make routine edits that need to be done. I believe that our charter and bylaws have to be reviewed at least every 2 years. We have made some changes, proposed changes, particularly to the bylaws. And I have to say the work group has had some challenges with scheduling. And so I wanted to actually bring the charter to the whole group. I think that it is helpful to look through what's really in the charter and really think through it as a group to ensure that this is what we feel like we're doing as PHAB, what we understand the statutory requirements for PHAB, and be able to give advice on what we think should be changed or adjusted. I think it helps understand what we're all doing here to go through what is in the charter. So we're taking it to the big group. The charter was sent out last week in the meeting materials. I hope you've had a chance to look at the duties and the objectives and reflect on whether you think they are aligned with the focus of this group and why you are here. So we are going to set a strict time frame because this can be fun, but it's a lot of work. And we're running a little bit over. We're going to do 30 minutes. I'm going to say we're going to do 25 minutes of this, and then we'll stop. And if we haven't gotten to all of it, and I doubt we will, then we'll decide if we want to do more at the next PHAB meeting or upcoming PHAB meeting, or if others are interested in joining the work group, we can take it offline once more people understand what the work is. So what we all together are asking of everyone on PHAB, we are going to go through the duties and the corresponding objectives that are currently in our charter. I'd like for everybody to reflect on each one, and I will read it aloud if you're unable to see the screen. And you can ask for clarifications if you'd like. And then we're going to ask to respond to each of the duties and corresponding objectives, whether we should keep it as is, whether there needs to be a revision to it, or if we should recommend we remove the objective altogether. So we'll experiment. We'll see how this goes. Reflection questions to think about as we go through each one. Does the objective reflect the role of a PHAB member? Is this still aligned with the function and focus of PHAB? Is it specific enough to be actionable? Are there gaps in the responsibilities? Has this objective been done in the past year, or should it be potentially removed? And is there anything missing that reflects our values or priorities? For a little bit more sort of context and background, the last time we made major revisions on the charter, I was lucky enough to be on that work group as well. And there was a lot of changing of language from PHAB will do to PHAB will advise on. It really reflected more PHAB as an advisory panel rather than like an oversight panel. So adjustments in words like that, I encourage people to give some reflection on if it doesn't feel like it is really resonating with what our role actually is. Does anybody have questions about this process? I guess I do. I'm not sure how it's going to go, but so we'll jump in and see how it goes. All right. So we're just gonna go through each one. And so the way that the charter is set up is there's a table. There's sort of overall objectives and the introduction, which the work group has reviewed and I think is pretty well aligned. If you have any concerns about that, please do email us or join the work group later. And then there's a table about the PHAB duties per ORS 431.123, which discusses and sets up PHAB as a board, and then what objectives we have to address those duties, those statutory duties. All right. So, letter A, make recommendations to the Oregon Health Policy Board on the development of statewide public health policies and goals. Current objectives we have to address this is to have knowledge of Oregon Health Policy Board agendas and priorities, create opportunities to align with the Oregon Health Policy Board priorities and elevate recommendations to the Oregon Health Policy Board, participate in and provide guidance for Oregon's state health assessment, regularly review state public health data to identify ongoing and emerging health issues, provide recommendations to Oregon Health Policy Board on policies needed to address priority public health issues, including the social determinants of health per PHAB's health equity review policy and procedure. So I will open this one up for discussion. Do you guys feel like this is what PHAB does? Is there anything in here that resonates with you or anything in here that makes you stop that might need to be changed? Lawrence.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
Well, I know I'm pretty new on this board, but I don't know that I was ever introduced to OHPB agendas and priorities. And so I would say this feels pretty foreign to me.
Mhm. Thank you. Veronica.
So, as someone that's been longer on I appreciate the context. We should have a representative from OHPB on this committee. When I first started, David Bangsberg was our representative and came every meeting and would give an update at every meeting. And since his departure, we currently do have a representative on our committee, but they don't often come. I don't know if she's here today. And so I do feel that, and this is something that we have voiced concern over, at least when I was chair with OHPB, going to their meetings, going to the chair meetings with them. The way it is they have a very small committee, honestly, and they have more subcommittees. They have more under them than they have committee members on OHPB. So I agree. I think that this is an area that, depending on who our liaison is with the Oregon Health Policy Board, then that is the board that we are under. So we are under the Oregon Health Policy Board. We don't. And then in the past, we've asked to kind of align priorities. My feeling when I was chair, when working with OHPB, is they were fine with whatever we wanted to do. Anyway, but we're not the priority subcommittee. I don't think this is a surprise to anybody here on the board. Like, some of the other subcommittees tend to get a liaison more readily. I don't know. I guess this is something that has been, it depends who our liaison is, and it could be much better.
So PHAB's goals with OHPB are only partly within our control because a lot has to do with them and their participation with us, is something I hear you saying. I think that we as, I as chair, I suppose, in all my free time, can be better about ensuring that PHAB has knowledge of the agendas and priorities. I feel like that's something that we can keep as a responsibility to educate ourselves. However, the chair and OHA can do that for the group. I think that providing recommendations to them, that last bullet point, is something that is within the span of control of PHAB. Creating opportunities to align and elevate is tough when we don't know what they are. Yeah, Florence.
Yeah, sorry, Sarah. I was just wondering, a few months ago, I think somebody from OHPB came in and we contributed some recommendation for the next CCO contract iteration. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was Oregon Health Policy Board.
Okay. So yeah, I think I would agree with having knowledge and then providing recommendation. That makes sense to me.
Sarah Boudreau, can you speak to anything to the third bullet point, participate in and provide guidance for a state health assessment and how the Health Policy Board and PHAB might interact on that?
Yeah, absolutely. So really thinking about the main duty there around advising on state public health policies and goals. Within the public health division, one of the main ways we do that is by assessing through a broad comprehensive state health assessment and then setting priorities that carry us through the next 5 years. So for folks that have been around for a while, PHAB used to be quite connected to what the state priorities were through that work and would regularly discuss those priority areas and kind of provide feedback and direction. We moved away from that with our last shift, but are interested in moving closer to it. We also have external sort of community-led steering committees for our state health assessment and state health improvement plan. Those groups are usually quite interested in knowing how they might be able to connect with PHAB, so there's a potential opportunity there. I mean, we usually create opportunities for PHAB members to be part of those other steering committees, but we also recognize that capacity is pretty short and you all sit on many, many groups.
So, as a draft proposal here, keeping bullet 1, having knowledge of their agendas and priorities. I think potentially keeping something around PHAB could have an objective to have knowledge around the state health assessment and provide, input if as indicated, and then and then the last bullet. I think regularly reviewing health data is not something we do. I don't see us being able to do that. And then the creating opportunities is a little bit out of our control. So that would be my proposal, is to keep bullet 1 and 5 and adjust the wording of bullet 3. And then again, we're going to have to come back to this, and the work group will have to come back to this. But if I could have, I think all we can do is a thumbs up or a thumbs down with our emojis, our Zoom.
Could we keep bullet point 2? This is Veronica Irvin. Did you say number 2 objective would be gone?
The creating opportunities to.
I mean, I think we should still keep it there. I think that could fluctuate depending on who our liaison is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that they like hearing our work when we go and present to them. So I think that we can go and ask to be on their monthly meetings occasionally and present updates of what we're doing. And they were always very favorable. I think that's part of the reason they don't have a liaison, is they're like, PHAB's doing fine. That's my feeling. So I think I would vote to keep number 2 bullet point on.
Okay. Ryan.
Yeah, I think that I agree with Veronica here, but I think with some changes, in the sense that obviously we have to one has to be addressed before we can get the second bullet. And then also, I don't like the language in this one that suggests that we're supposed to align with whatever they're doing. I
Mhm.
just feel like I recognize there's a power differential. Like we look at things, we make recommendations, and we can't necessarily hold the same amount of influence over what actually happens as that board. But I don't think the assumption should be that we're just looking to align ourselves with whatever is going on over there. I think that our role should be much more uh, balanced and nuanced than that. So I think if it's kept, it should be reworded for sure.
What do you think about just creating opportunities to elevate recommendations and just take out the align part? I like that. Okay, with this discussion, how's everybody feeling? Thumbs up, if you do a thumbs down, we can still move on and we'll come back to this at a later time. Um, I'm seeing thumbs ups. Okay, isn't this fun, guys? Jenny really likes this. Thanks, Jenny. All right, let's move on. The letter B. Make recommendations to the Oregon Health Policy Board on how other statewide priorities, such as the provision of early learning services and the delivery of healthcare services, affect and are affected by statewide public health policies and goals. So again, this is per ORS. If we were to actually change the part on the left, that would take legislative action. So that is in the law. Um, the objectives that have been come up to address this, that have that we have to address this are: one, regularly review health system transformation priorities. Two, recommend how health system transformation priorities and statewide public health goals can best be aligned. Three, identify opportunities for public health to support health system transformation priorities. Four, identify opportunities for healthcare delivery system to support statewide public health goals. Show of hands, who feels like they know what health system transformation is to start with? Okay, we're seeing some. That's good. Thoughts on this one? Does this feel like, if we go back to our reflection questions, does this align with your ideas of what PHAB does? Ryan, thank you. Mhm.
Yeah, I think this is maybe it could just be me. I'm a public health, a population health person in a school of public health, and so I think that having one of these objectives be so expressly focused on healthcare systems,
Mhm.
um, I don't like uh the encroachment of putting everything under like the healthcare delivery systems umbrella when a lot of things are like social determinants population. And so for me, I think that the only recommendation or suggestion I have is thinking about how we um couple or pair things within these sets of duties and objectives. Because this seems to me like if it's about healthcare systems delivery, that seems like a separate group than folks that are doing public health. Understanding that like healthcare systems and clinical things are under that umbrella. So I guess for me, like some clarity, conceptual clarity about which lanes and domains are really the purview of this group in relation to the language that's here in terms of health systems and service delivery, things of that nature.
Mhm. Heather.
So I see this one as really important. And again, been on this for a year, I guess, this committee, and I'm not seeing this really happening. And I think as we continue to go into a lot of uncertain times, where can there be some more alignment? And I'm thinking more around when I think of healthcare transformation, I'm thinking more around our CCOs and QUIMs, and I don't know if that's where this falls, but public health, especially local public health, is greatly involved in all of those things, yet often isn't always part of the conversation and the setting of, like, for instance, QUIMs or other things. So I think there's potential here, and I think I'd like to see it to have it on here somewhere, but I don't really see this happening right now. And I'm a little nutty today. I'm not feeling well.
Me neither. I'm right there with you. I think it's oh yeah, go ahead, Kelly.
Sorry, Sarah, I didn't mean to. I would have to agree with Dr. Petaway. I wanted to just weigh in on, calling out specifically healthcare systems rather than, or health delivery systems rather than health system or public health system seems to limit the reach for all health systems that we work through or public health. I love I really like the goal on the focus area, but I think there could be some wordsmithing to be done to assure that it is broader through an encompassing of all public health, and that may be too broad. Um, but it just and same thing for early learning, calling out specifically early learning, which is agreed hugely important, but is it more important than other, social determinants of health that are high priority and even higher priority now, such as, food insecurity and many other components. So I'm just curious what the rest of the board thinks about if there's an opportunity to um, just broaden that scope a little bit to capture more, or alternatively, if that gets too broad. So thank you all for your consideration.
Thanks, Kelly. Um, yeah, I think so. Like I said, if to truly adjust the part on the left would take legislative action, which um,
Okay, probably not worth it. This is Kelly
no, no,
then.
no, no. I think it's worth considering, but I think that we also want to be really clear about what we're asking. Um, I think perhaps what I would recommend is rather than identifying opportunities like the last two bullet points in general, we can, as PHAB, hold ourselves responsible to making sure that we do understand the priorities of other subcommittees of Oregon Health Policy Board. I think it kind of goes back to, overall health policy board priorities, which, CCOs are within their, there's, well, I don't know if it's a health policy board. I feel like understanding what all other health systems OHA is engaging with and recommending and ensuring that we have a good understanding of where public health might fit into that and recommending to OHA how we could best align with other groups rather than, you know, I feel like some of this word is like we should be telling other groups what to do and make sure that public health is there, kind of to Ryan's statement. But I think that understanding and then to Heather's comment of understanding how we can recommend we work together to increase efficiencies could be wordsmiths to come out of this. Does that sound muddy as clear as mud? If you think I'm on the right track, let's do a thumbs up or thumbs down. Cool. Um, we have a couple more minutes. Can we go to the next slide? All right, this is the last one we're going to do today. So the law says, make recommendations to strengthen foundational capabilities and programs for governmental public health and other public health programs and activities. This one seems a little bit more digestible to me. I'm putting in my thoughts before I read it. Sorry about that. All right, bullet one, provide representation and participate in administrative rulemaking process when appropriate. Two, provide recommendations on updates to the Public Health Modernization Manual as needed. And three, make recommendations on the roles and responsibilities of partners, including LPHAs, tribes, CBOs, OHA, and others, to the governmental public health system. So does this align with your idea of PHAB? Do you see your role in this? What are your thoughts? Does anyone think this one
Hi.
needs to be changed? Oh, sorry. What's that?
Hi, no, hi Sarah. And everyone. This is Marie. This looks consistent with my experience with this group. The the third dot point doesn't seem to have like a frequency, um, where the other two have some tempering of the language, like when appropriate or as needed. And so I'm just wondering if there's value in considering some flexible language like that in the third dot point. Thank you.
Ryan. Oh, yeah, sorry, Ryan, you're muted.
Yeah, I agree. This one seems pretty consistent and familiar. I think the only thing I think looking at this now, I'm not sure if this is somewhere else, but it seems that we want to also acknowledge the significance of public health training and like workforce. So something that maybe expressly names in terms of like if we're making recommendations about foundation capabilities, well, what does that public health workforce and those systems look like going forward into the future to pursue these other objectives? And so it seems like a bullet point might want to engage in collaborations or naming potential partners being public health training programs.
Thank you. Okay. We're about to run out of our 25 minutes I allotted. Really appreciate you guys going through just starting this exercise. There are 10 goals like this. It goes up to M, and then there are others. So PHAB does need to go through all of them and make edits and approve it within the next couple of months. I really just take a minute now and see if anybody really enjoyed this. It's kind of fun and cool to think about. Anybody want to join the work group and keep moving this work forward outside of the main meetings? Just give a minute for anybody to volunteer. If anybody feels strongly opposed to me bringing this back in small segments throughout our full PHAB meetings. Okay. No strong opposition, so I guess we'll keep doing this in short, digestible chunks throughout the rest of this summer and fall. Sound good? Thank you. Okay. We will move on to funding, another favorite topic. Okay, so thank you, Marie. Over the last few months, we've heard a presentation on the history of public health modernization and have started discussing PHAB's role to provide recommendations on priorities and funding. Last month, Naomi provided an overview of the OHA's Public Health Division's budget, including some of the key budget risks and drivers. This month, we're going to continue in our context setting by sharing work that PHAB did a few years ago to develop the scenarios for priorities and funding. Some PHAB members have shared that it's helpful to start with work that's happened in the past rather than starting over to help inform what decisions we make in the future. So Steve is going to review the history of the scenarios that were developed and then has some questions on how we want to move forward. I'll pass it over to you, Steve.
Sounds good. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Stephen Fiala, he, him pronouns, modernization lead with OHA Public Health. And as Sarah said, just continuing our conversation today around PHAB's priority setting. Thanks, Dean. And I believe it was Marie that had the great idea to kind of kick off this discussion around priority setting for any, future investments in modernization or how we consider even current investments in modernization moving forward by looking at what the FAB did in the past in terms of priority setting. So thank you for that, Marie. And so we're gonna take today and just briefly walk through again the purpose of why we're talking so much about priority setting, if it's not already obvious, and then take a look at what the FAB did in the past. I'll have to rely on others that have been on the FAB and maybe Sarah Boudreau for a little bit more about the history of how that process went. And then, yeah, and then as Sarah said, we'll end with just wanting to get a sense of how folks want to approach future priority setting. So next slide, kind of already said this, but I'll be brief. Again, our time today is just to determine the approach y'all want to take for prioritizing any additional investments in modernization. And I know that maybe feels a little weird to say, just given our kind of current context and climate around resources and some of the kind of shrinking we're experiencing. But I think overall, still feeling like it's a good use of time and this space together to be thinking about prioritization, whether it's an increase or a decrease in the investment. So we have a strategy for that on what to focus on. It's also an opportunity for the FAB to, again, look at what was prioritized in the past and just think about those priorities within our current context and whether we want to refresh those, refine those a bit, or if they feel good to move forward with. Again, this informs things like the development of the policy option package around modernization and other ways that we communicate modernization priorities and investments and resources. And generally, those are needing to be determined by the end of the year. So this feels like a really good time to do this together, or for you all to do this. And then again, just approaching this with the caveat that nothing is really set in stone in terms of resources and priority. And ultimately, the process for that is determined by the governor and the governor's office. But it's still really important to have FABs. Oh, thank you, Sarah. For FAB to spend some time thinking about how it wants to prioritize investments. Next slide. And so this was just a screenshot of one of the tables from the past FAB prioritization work. I believe in the updated packet of materials that Veronica sent out, we did include the full document so you can see everything. But as you can see, just generally from this on the far left-hand side is kind of the larger priority area. So in this case, public health workforce development and retention. And then folks walked through kind of different scenarios of what that would look like in terms of investment in the workforce at varying levels of investment. And so I want to kind of just walk through that previous work. And if it's okay with everyone, I think just generally walking through how the previous work and the kind of high level prioritization categories, and then leave you with the questions we're trying to answer, and then I'll pause and we can go back to any of the materials that may inform the discussion y'all want to have. So I think moving forward, just giving people a general sense of things. Again, in the packet, we have all the details around these priority areas, but wanted to give you the high level outlook on what FAB had prioritized last time. And this is in order of the proposed like phasing or implementation as funds became available. So there's a meaning to the order. So first was public health workforce development and retention. The next area was around equity initiatives, responding to public health threats, communicable disease control and prevention, climate adaptation, environmental health, community-led data initiatives, reproductive health provider network, chronic disease prevention, access to preventive health services, and then at the end, broad implementation across public health programs. So kind of bringing everyone into the fold. So those were those high-level categories, and within the more detailed information, you'll see kind of investments in each of these categories as more funding became available. So moving forward. Also want to acknowledge in thinking through the process you all want to use to be thinking of priority setting, that there are all of these inputs for your decision making as well that we're happy to bring to you all for consideration. This, of course, includes the modernization manual that we've had for a while, but there are also newer sources of information that we can bring back to y'all as you talk through prioritization. That includes the recent capacity and cost assessment results, the modernization evaluation, that program design and evaluation recently completed. We have information around the modernization accountability metrics that we collect, and then also recent work around the health equity framework and specifically the role of CBOs. And Sarah, I think you added something to this list that I'm forgetting. Or was this the updated list? I also have a bit of a cold and I'm on a cold med, and so forgive me if I spin a little today. Anyway, there might be another input. So we can move forward to the next slide though. So just kind of to recognize all the additional kind of sources of information that y'all have as well to inform your prioritization process. This, not needing to read this, but this was just an image from the capacity and cost assessment as a reminder of the kind of source of information that you have around like where we're currently spending across the governmental public health system on programs and capabilities and where the stated gaps are, as just an example of some other inputs for your decision making. And then the last slide. And so leaving you all here, and of course can bring up the materials that provide more detail around this. But potentially a decision point for today could be if you all want to use a similar process as the last group and really look pretty holistically across all of those 10 priority areas and consider what kind of implementation would look like at various levels of investment. Another approach would potentially be taking a more focused approach and identifying a handful of those areas to really build out a plan for additional investment rather than taking on all of those areas, or something else entirely that your group, that the PHAB wants to do. And so I think that was kind of it. And I don't know if we want to like look at the details of those previous materials as a starting place, but I'll stop talking and see what some like thoughts are. Would it help just to like walk through the previous tables again to kind of Marie's point about what did y'all do last time as a starting point to think about process for prioritization? Yeah, Florence.
Thank you, Steve. And congrats on being a doctor, I guess. So I think I was part of a group that contributed to this massive amount of work, and I gotta say I'm a little bit surprised by the fact that we're considering possibly redoing this work, because I thought that the work had been done, and that we had a kind of like a clear mapping out of what could be prioritized based on the levels of investment that the legislature would do. So yeah, I'm just coming in with more questions than anything else, and wondering why we're even considering redoing the work.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid comment. Thank you for bringing that up, Florence. Another option is to take a look at that previous work and say that we feel like that we would have the same priorities and the same order of implementation, and it would build on the same way with increasing levels of investment. So that's an excellent point. Veronica?
I guess mine's also a question. So I agree with what Florence said.
Yeah.
But also in the priority areas, there's like the ranking, the 1 to 10. There's that one slide. And at about that same time that this was going on, like so about 2 years ago, PHAB was given orders or asked, not ordered, I don't want to say that, asked to do work groups around the health equity, more work groups around that, and the workforce, with the thought that there would be additional funding. And I just want to know if there's still additional funding thoughts outside of public health modernization to support the public health workforce training, or I'm trying to think of like how we're not competing, like is there other sources of funding that OHA is thinking about considering for future bienniums to support public health outside of public health modernization? I'm specifically thinking workforce because it was mentioned to us that the goal was to come up with this workforce plan and then to develop a budget to go along with that. And I would love for that to not compete with public health modernization funding and just supplement or enhance.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. Sarah, you were nodding along as well. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
I'm just nodding in agreement.
Okay, great. That's always helpful too. Any other thoughts? I'm so far it kind of, again, thank you, Florence, for starting us off too with another option, which is to potentially revisit all of the existing amazing work that was done and not put a lot of additional effort into feeling like we need to revise anything. Seems like Veronica agrees. And oh, sorry, Ryan or Dr. Petaway.
Thanks. Yeah, I think I'm kind of in that same space of like, do we start all over? Is this a completely restart, or I'm not really quite sure. I will say though, based on what was there, what was decided upon at the levels that were chosen, the funding buckets, I do feel like um, I'm always been an advocate for community-led data systems and training pipelines. I get folks thinking about contributing in public health, being trained in public health, and those two are kind of like they work together. Like folks who are trained in high school on public health and data systems can collect their own data. I feel like the phrase now more than ever is thrown around a lot, but I think this is one of those times where it holds true. If we see how data can just erased, people can be erased, entire communities can be erased, denominators are no longer collected, like community-led data systems are fundamental to doing community-centered public health work. If we're not funding community-led data systems as a top priority, regardless of the funding level, we allow ourselves to be in a situation that we're currently in right now with a lot of communities that have no capacity, no set of ways and tools and methods to kind of do that work, right? And so I just feel like the only thing I would say is like regardless of the process decided here, I do think that scaling up the seriousness of prioritizing community data systems, I feel like is pretty obvious at this moment.
Sorry, I was taking notes. I know other people are too, but I just needed to. Thank you. I think that's a really great point. And so even if we're really working from all of the great existing work, there might still be that opportunity to take a look at, especially that rank order list that was decided on last time within this current context that we find ourselves in, and identifying ones we might want to elevate a bit more. And also, I really appreciate you kind of linking the kind of workforce aspect with the community-led data piece as well. So it might be nice to think about the ones in the list that also kind of hang together or might rely on each other, or at least be complementary. Heather?
So I agree with both comments that just came is we got to really look at the current context, and I would hate to redo all this work. And I'm just thinking about how we do this, and I think I've said this before, without looking at the full picture of what's going on. And so for instance, I'll just say, if funding from all other places stays pretty stagnant or increases, then yes, we could move on to these other things. But I mean, like for local public health, at least for I think our health department, I'm sure other health departments were struggling just to maintain core public health services. And so it's kind of going into when I think about things like syphilis, where we are making huge strides. I mean, we've prevented 3 congenital syphilis cases just in the past year that would have cost our health system tremendously. Local public health is the only one doing that work. Like no one's going to take up that work of going into some of these have been, unsheltered um, people living in camps, going out there, working with people, building trust, bringing treatment out to them. And so I want to kind of give some really concrete examples of the work that we do at a local level that no one's going to take that on if it's not done. And so we're trying to figure out ways to keep that going in the midst of potential massive cuts. And so that's where I'm going to turn to public health modernization. And at that point, it's not really modernization, it's just keeping us afloat. And that those are the things that we've also kind of explained to our legislators when advocating for public health modernization is that kind of on the ground work that we're doing every day when it comes to syphilis, when it comes to TB, when it comes to communicable disease work with some of our most vulnerable people in our community. So I don't know if I have an answer. I just don't, I would hate to lose, especially the communicable disease and emerging public health threats as a priority, even though the cost and capacity assessment showed we're doing better there. I think we're going to go backwards.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Heather, and just that very pragmatic lens again of looking at this in our current context and especially your perspective as a local public health authority and needing to maintain core services in this environment. And not like losing all the advances we've made over the last decade in those prioritized areas of emergency preparedness and CD. I think that's an excellent point, and kind of balancing that with some of the other areas that we might want to advance. That's an excellent point. I'm hearing a lot of experiences and reactions to our current context that might make for really good, like, I don't, at least like guiding questions or like things to consider if there is going to be a look at the existing work and thinking about it in the current context. Florence, sorry.
Yeah, thanks, Heather. Great points. I think I have questions, additional questions, and my apologies if this was discussed already. One big question is like, when do we want to? So I guess I have two. One is if we decide to kind of like review this work and the priorities that had been identified. What is our time frame? And to what because okay, we're mid-May almost. The legislature is going to adjourn in like 6 weeks. And then we might have hopefully a financial point for modernization investment or not, additional or not, right? My memory of this work took way more than 6 weeks, I think. So that's one. So this is why I'm asking, just like in terms of all the logistics, right? For the contracts going out and the distribution of monies and la di la. Is this something you want us to do before the end of June? So first question. And would that apply then to the next biennium of funding? Or is there a time frame that is longer, and are we looking at maybe next year or you name it? The other piece that I wanted to bring up is I would be happy to review the priorities once we have more information about what the budget is going to look like for Oregon at the end of this session, and also what's going to happen at the federal level. Because right now we're operating pretty much in a assumptions or um, you know, skinny budget proposals that then are being put out there and, without necessarily a lot of specificity or granularity, right? As was explained previously by Naomi and Dana. So for me, like in the current context and with those questions in mind, this is kind of why I was like, okay, why is it that we're doing this? Or that we're even considering doing this, because I wouldn't have enough data to make informed decisions that would, to Heather's point, not um, um, endanger possibly like the current work that is going on. And in Lincoln County, modernization is how we do public health,
Yeah.
and I think it's across the board, hopefully.
Yeah, thank you, Florence. I think your points are exactly why we wanted to bring this question to the group, because we want to understand what would feel right in terms of the timing and in terms of our process. And so from your comments, I'm hearing potentially some recommendations, that we would hold off until the end of session when we have a clear understanding and more complete information around the budget picture to be making prioritization decisions. So I think that's an excellent point. And then I think in our minds, and Sarah Boudreau, please jump in. This definitely, we weren't anticipating, between now and the end of June being the time frame, but rather between now and the end of the year, kind of leading up to next session and our next opportunity to communicate priorities for modernization and potential resource needs. So a bit of a longer time frame, but then even past that kind of sets us up hopefully to talk about modernization and the next biennium generally. But Sarah, please jump in with any other thoughts.
I'm not sure I have much to add. I mean, yeah, I think we're really thinking, ahead to potentially next legislative session and moving forward. We've done a ton of work in the current biennium around the cost and capacity assessment, the deliverables coming from the two PHAB work groups, and more. And it does seem like this is a moment to come together and reflect and think about how PHAB wants to prioritize moving forward. And, sort of a fall timeline potentially gives you an opportunity, like summer fall timeline gives you an opportunity to do that when there's not the pressure of a dollar amount being on the table, but really thinking about how you envision using what we know and what's happening to plan forward.
And Sarah, do you want to quickly speak to Florence's question about kind of budget requests in a short session?
There never has been a budget request for something like public health modernization during a short session.
Thank you, Florence. All really great points. Yeah, Sarah.
Just doing a time check and just kind of circle back and see if I feel like there are some thoughtful comments and thoughts, and curious if you feel like we got what we need here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I'm hearing definitely start with all the existing work that people spent many hours on, potentially some guiding questions for the group coming out of some of the reflections on like workforce, community-led data, maintaining, CD and emergency preparedness that we could make sure we come up with. And then I think based on Florence's comments, I am interested, and I know we need to wrap up, but I am interested in other people's reactions to Florence's comments about definitely waiting until session is over and we have a clearer budget picture and more complete information before we would begin the process. And then timing generally of maybe approaching this in the fall as a time frame to aim for. I don't know if anyone has thoughts about that. I know it's challenging to think about this in our current environment.
Yeah, I feel like there's so many unknowns right now. It's really hard to make any decisions on how we would approach, um, anything. Yeah, I feel like there's so many unknowns right now. I see the value of waiting till we have a little bit more security in what we're looking
Okay.
at.
Yeah, I mean, maybe at the very least we can just kind of type up these notes and have kind of a build out a process. We can build out a start to draft a process for when folks are ready, and we can kind of play it by ear and revisit the question after session and kind of see what information we have at that point and revisit the question. See a thumbs up from Florence on that.
I think Bob was nodding as well.
Oh, okay, great. Okay. Oh, there we go. Got some thumbs. Thank you. Okay, well, that sounds great. We'll be sure to just kind of document the conversation so far, and we'll revisit this at the end of session.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
all.
much, Steve,
Appreciate it.
Dr. Steve, Dr. Fiala.
Thanks, y'all.
I realized that I forgot to ask for a motion to approve our April meeting minutes before we go for a break. I'm wondering if anyone got a chance to review them. Veronica, are you making a motion?
Yeah, make a motion.
Second, this is Jackie.
And Jackie seconds it. Um, anyone opposed to approving April meeting minutes? Any abstentions? Are all else in favor? Ryan abstains. Thank you.
Aye.
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 And thank you. April meeting minutes have been approved. Thank you guys so much. Sorry about forgetting that. We have time in our schedule now for a break. We have about 10-minute break. We're running 5 minute behind. I think that's acceptable. We'll make it up. So let's come back at 4:30. Yes, sorry, I was just finishing chewing.
That was a
Back
fast
4:30.
10 minutes.
It was a fast 10 minutes. I agree. All right, well, it is 4:30. We'll bring us back to the May 8th meeting of the Public Health Advisory Board. And we're going to start out with passing it over to Sharina Walker to give us an update from the 2025 legislative session and key bills that OHA is tracking. Sharina, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I have just a quick update. I think session is moving along. We do have some dates coming up around some deadlines for bills that need to be scheduled or have a work session. So I think tomorrow is the deadline for bills needing to be scheduled. So in the second chamber. So if a bill started in the House side and needs to be heard on the Senate side, a schedule for that work session needs to be scheduled by tomorrow and vice versa. And then that work session needs to be had by the 23rd. But that doesn't apply to bills that are in joint committees, Ways and Means, Rules, Revenue, that kind of thing. So it's just those bills that are either in on the Senate or House side. And then I think I might have some slides. All right, so things are still moving along for our public health division bills. Most of them are in Ways and Means. We do have the revenue forecast coming out May 14th, and I do expect Ways and Means to start picking up and things getting scheduled at that time. That's usually when that happens. And so hopefully next meeting we'll have a lot more updates around bills, especially the budget bill, OHA budget bill, which is 5025. So I have links in these slides if you want to go in and read more about these bills, but I've given an overview in the last few meetings, so I think we can probably move to the next slide. Same with kind of the bills of interest that I have shared with previously. Things are kind of moving along. Either in Ways and Means, so they don't necessarily meet that deadline for scheduling. And so we're kind of just waiting for them to pick back up. And let's see here. I think we can go to the next slide. Basically continuing on with that theme, I think, Sarah, you asked a question last time about one of the psilocybin bills. So I believe that's HB 2387. So there was a work session held for that one on the 1st. And so that's the dual licensing one that you had mentioned. So if folks want to read that more in detail, you can check it out on OLIS. And I don't think I've actually shared out about the Momnibus bills, which I think there's 5 of them in the past, but I thought maybe it would be helpful for folks to know that there's a pretty great website on these. So Reynolds is kind of championing this in the legislature. And I can give you kind of a quick overview of what those are. So Senate Bill 691. This one is around, let's see here. This one is around housing related to, so the Momnibus is referring to kind of maternal and child health type services. And so 690 is related to housing. And then 692 is maternal behavioral health support. So it has funding in that bill. Again, you can go to this website and read more about it. 693 is the doula traditional health workers proposal. 694 is perinatal workforce. And 695 is related to child poverty reduction. Or no, I got that. Sorry, did I say 694? Yeah, 694 child poverty reduction, and then 695 is related to some work with CCOs. And so it might be of interest to check these out and read more about them. I know Reynolds holds a roundtable discussion, and I believe that you can get access to that on the website. So if you click on this Momnibus link, it will take you there. And I think there's also recordings of past roundtables. So that's really all I have for today. I don't know if folks have questions or anything they want to share out related to session. But like I said, most of these things are, either in Ways and Means or in other committees that just are waiting to get heard.
Sharima, you have a question. This is Sarah. You have a question in the chat.
Oh, okay. Check that.
Which one was the perinatal mental health work group that you mentioned? Do you remember which one?
Perinatal mental health. Well, let's see here. Hold on, my computer just froze. Well, the mental health one is the maternal behavioral mental health support is 691, but there's also 692, which has that one has some funding in it for community-based perinatal provider access fund, which would go out to CBOs. So I'm not sure if you're talking about that one or the maternal behavioral health support one. Does that answer your question? There's also the perinatal workforce. So that one is 693.
Any other questions?
Sorry, there also was a comment in chat about there may need to be a correction for House Bill 3197 as it may still be in the Joint Addictions Committee.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Sharina. We really appreciate your updates. It's very, very helpful.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Next up, we have Sarah Boudreau providing an update on the Preventive Health and Health Services Block Grant and describing actions needed by PHAB. So this is a non-competitive grant through CDC issued to all states to determine public health priorities. PHAB is the grant advisory board and is required to review and to vote on the work plan to submit to the CDC. So Sarah is going to give us a presentation of the current priorities and work plan, and next month we will need to be prepared to make a final decision and vote on the proposed work plan. Thanks, Sarah.
Great, thanks. Veronica, you can go to the next slide. Yeah, thanks. Hi, everyone. So as Sarah mentioned, you all are the advisory group for our state's Preventive Health and Health Services Block Grant. So today is just an update. It's an update on the work happening in the current year, and then next month I'll be back with the proposed work plan for the upcoming year, and we'll ask you to vote on that one. So as Sarah mentioned, that I'm just going to use the term block grant from here on out, but it's a non-competitive grant to all the states and territories through CDC. It's been around for decades and decades, just kind of steadily providing some funding for public health infrastructure. Especially back in the 80s and 90s, it really was the only source of flexible funding for a lot of states to be able to focus funding on infrastructure or on priorities specifically identified in their states. Since then, we've seen other little pockets of flexible funding popping up. Right now, we have public health infrastructure grants, but in general, funds as flexible as this are pretty few and far between. The main requirement is that we tie our use of the block grant funds to Healthy People 2030 objectives. And so in Oregon, we use these funds to support our state's state health improvement plan. So that's the PHIR04 you see there. And then we also use it to support some aspects of public health modernization that we can't pay for with our state general funds. So that's the PHIR08. But in general, we really focus on using the funds for work that supports our entire public health system. And then there is one carve out in the federal funding. So a portion of the funds needs to be allocated for rape prevention and victim services. In Oregon, we just pass all of those funds to the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. So next slide. All right, here's a snapshot of what the funding has looked like over the past few years. The take home is it's very, very flat. So really, really no change at all. We haven't got our allocations for the next year yet. The next year would start on October 1st. We've received some indication that we might hear what our allocations are soonish, but nothing is final yet. I guess I'll mention that, these funds get zeroed out in the presidential budgets for most administrations. And it always ends up being funded. It definitely is zeroed out in the current presidential budget. So there's a lot of unknown around these funds. Okay, so I mentioned that we use the funds to support our state health assessment and state health improvement plan. So this slide just shows a little bit about the work that we're doing. We're doing a lot of community engagement right now to prepare for our next state health improvement plan, really working with community partners, local public health, CCOs, and others to inform what the priorities and strategies will be in our next 5-year plan. So some funding that supports that community engagement. Community health worker trainings. So we've been working with the Benton County Health Navigation Program They run a program that certifies community health workers throughout the state. And with our funds, they're able to expand the trainings that they're offering, really providing a training to a cohort of, I believe, 24 people at no cost. And these are virtual trainings. So really focusing on being able to train community health workers and who live in rural areas of the state or who work with specific communities of color. We're using the funds for some very small communications, preparing for the launch of our next state health improvement plan. So communications is really a pillar of being able to run a strong state health improvement plan. It's an important strategy for really aligning across types of partners and working toward collective impact for state health priorities. And then finally, we use the funds to support. We've always had an external steering committee that leads our state health improvement plan. We're in the process, or will be in the process this year, of forming a new group. So funds pay for things like committee member stipends, a facilitator, in-person meetings, different things like that. I should also mention within this stream of funding, we fund 3 positions within the public health division. So our coordinator who leads all of our state health improvement plan work, and then 2 additional positions. And the bulk of the funds, our Block Grant funds, go to the state health improvement plan. And those are the only funds that we have for our state health improvement plan implementation work. And then we hold a small portion of the funds for public health modernization. One position funded out of that, it's my position, and I serve as the block grant coordinator for Oregon. And then there's a very small amount of funds remaining. So those are funds that we use to support PHAB's, pay for PHAB's retreats, or if you ever want to have external facilitators or training, it would come out of here. We provide some funding to the Conference of Local Health Officials to support their regular meetings. And then if there's extra funds, we use it for training and technical assistance that really serves our entire public health system, or to help us just do some of the work to meet our legislative reporting requirements. So using the funding for a lot of the reports and deliverables that we have to submit. And then finally, the funding to the Oregon Coalition Against Domestic and Sexual Violence. And the funds that go to the coalition, it's just over $88,000 per year. So they use the funds to support a portion of a position, their prevention coordinator. You can see some of the activities that that person is responsible for. Really, they convene organizations across the state that that work in the area of sexual violence prevention. They provide a ton of training and technical assistance, developing and disseminating materials and resources. And then they also provide funds through grants to 3 culturally specific organizations to support those organizations in their sexual violence prevention work. All right, so role of the Public Health Advisory Board. As we've already said, you are the advisory group, and this is required by federal code. Our requirements are to meet with you 2 times every year so that you can exercise your duties as the advisory board. One of those meetings is today to hear about the work that's happening now. One of those meetings will be next month when we come back with a work plan. Next steps. We're also required to hold a public hearing once we develop our work plan and budget for the next year. So again, the year that would start on October 1st. The timing, and then we usually need to submit the work plan and budget by the end of June. So the timing is getting a little compressed since states and territories, we don't have our allocations yet. Our CDC project officer has asked us to begin working on those work plans and budgets and prepare for the funding to be there. So that's what we will be doing. And I'll be back in June with more information. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have about the block grant or the work we're doing with these funds.
So, Sarah, any input into the work plan would need to be given now because we need to have it should be finalized and voted on next month.
Well, what I shared today is the work plan for the current year. This is the work that's happening, and it's what PHAB reviewed a year ago. Next month, we'll be bringing a work plan for moving forward, and that's the one that you'll want to look at. We are not intending to make big changes in how those funds are being used. We'll build that work plan and budget to continue to support our state health improvement plan. Hold some funds for modernization, things that we can't pay for with the state general funds. So you got a sneak preview of what you're going to see next month.
You said a dollar figure that goes to the sexual violence prevention? What was that? I missed it.
Yeah, it's just over 88,000 per year.
Yeah.
And then of the remaining funds, about 2/3 go to support the state health improvement plan and about 1/3 for public health modernization.
I don't know that much about the coalition against domestic and sexual violence. I know some of the local services that they support. Is there anybody else doing that work, or are they really the ones doing that work in Oregon?
They are the statewide coalition. So all states have a statewide coalition, and in Oregon, that's the function that they play.
Okay, thank you for that.
And their work is very upstream, so it's not they don't provide crisis or emergency services, but their purpose is really upstream prevention in a way that centers the experience of people experiencing domestic or sexual violence.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other comments, thoughts, questions? I know we've had a few PHAB members who have had to drop off, go to other things. Yeah, excited to see it next month. Thanks, Sarah. I am going to talk now a little bit more. I feel like I've been talking a lot today. But we have been talking about, in our PHAB agendas, bringing back more opportunity to engage with PHAB on different health topics. There's a lot of business that we do in these meetings, and budgets and things like that. But I think really grounding ourselves in the work of public health and the health topics that public health addresses helps. I'm hoping that it can be engaging and help everybody, understand how your input is really important here on PHAB. So, other topics in the past that have been historically discussed around substance use prevention, the opioid response, cleaner air initiatives have come. It's been a while since we've talked about sort of direct health needs. So I'm going to start us off this month by talking about syphilis and sort of the public health needs and responses. And I would love for all of you to be thinking about, your organization, your sector, what you know about syphilis, what you or your organizations could know more from this, or sort of where your organization could help address an overall public health issue in Oregon. So that's kind of what we're thinking about. And then think about if you have any further topics similar to this for other what we're calling public health roundtables for future meetings. All right, so this is me. I'm Sarah Present. I'm the health officer for Clackamas County. I'm also a family physician. I work 2 days a week in RFQHC as a primary care provider. Next slide. So syphilis is one of our diseases that we're addressing in our accountability metrics. It's really a big topic in public health recently because we have seen a reemergence. So we talk about emerging diseases. We're also talking a lot about reemerging diseases for a number of reasons. So this is a graph of syphilis rates of various stages, the early and the red and the blue stages are kind of the earlier stages and more infectious, but we won't go into syphilis staging. It's very complicated. But syphilis has been around since as long as we know in humanity. It is a sexually transmitted infection. It's very complicated. It can affect any part of the human body. There are some different ways that it is spread sexually, during different stages of the disease and how it affects the body. Long-term effects of syphilis, if untreated, can be quite devastating for adults and for infants, which I'm going to talk more about. And a lot of those effects are either cardiovascular or particularly neurologic. It can lead to blindness, deafness, dementia, and is thought to be a primary, cause of dementia for many parts of our human history. In the 1940s, it was determined that penicillin treats syphilis, and penicillin still treats syphilis very effectively. We don't have resistance. It is a very, it's an injectable form of penicillin primarily, but there are other oral medications that treat syphilis very well. It's a very pretty simple antibiotic regimen. But we're still seeing more and more syphilis. There was another bump in the late 80s, early 90s, connected with HIV/AIDS epidemic, and then dipped down again and has been increasing in the last 10 years. Next slide, please. There are a number of reasons for syphilis rates increasing. Most of them, as far as we can identify, really are based on our social determinants of health that put people at risk for a number of chronic diseases, as well as infectious diseases. So this is a rate table for Oregon rates from 2014 to 2023. 2024, I think, is pretty stable. We have had a slight decrease since 22, which was a recent peak. And I would like to say that is due to some really intensive public health responses to this rising threat. The orange bars are the total numbers of cases, and the blue bar is rates per 100,000 people. Next slide. One of our biggest concerns, syphilis is a concern altogether. It can be a devastating disease if untreated, but it's particularly devastating for infants. So a pregnant person can pass syphilis to a developing fetus, which leads to a number of developmental abnormalities. Worse, the earlier in pregnancy you get it, but even later in pregnancy, if a baby is born without any signs or symptoms, if it's not caught and treated, they can develop because that baby does have the infection and it continues to infect the neonate until it is treated. The graph on the right, so back in the 90s, the syphilis rates were highest among men who have sex with men. Over the last 20 years, the rates in people born female, assigned at birth, and people who can become pregnant has increased faster than the rates among people who cannot become pregnant, who are male. And so you see that male to female ratio dropping down. And that's concerning because that increases the risk of somebody having a pregnancy during an active syphilis infection. On the right side are just some statistics about the drastic increase in newborn syphilis cases in the United States and in Oregon. In 2022, Oregon was 16th out of the 50 states in our rates of congenital syphilis, which is higher than any of us would like to be. Next slide. A lot of people don't know that, I mean, a lot of people have heard about syphilis. A lot of people have no idea that syphilis is really surging right now. Surging comparably to other things, it may not be that number, that big of a number, but the changes are concerning to us in public health that see, trends of things that are devastating. We like to catch it early and get the word out there. But what's even less known is the effects of syphilis if you are pregnant, the effects on that fetus. So it is a direct transfer through the placenta, and it's the fetus can be affected. For those who are pregnant during kind of the early stages, 80% of infants are affected. 25% are stillborn. 14% die in the neonatal period, and 41% live but have problems from the infection. Late syphilis, where people don't have any symptoms, they don't know that they have syphilis, even those individuals can pass the infection to a fetus, and 23% of infants are affected in people who are pregnant during the late stages of syphilis. 12% stillbirth, 9% neonatal death, and 2% alive but affected. The effects of syphilis for fetuses and infants are, again, syphilis can affect any part of the human body. And in the development of the human body, it can cause pretty significant damage in the bone structures, the skin, neurologic, so a lot of deafness, blindness, and significant neurologic developmental issues. And then it can affect kidneys, lungs, liver, and GI system. Next slide. Next slide, please. And it is completely preventable. So, a big target for public health intervention, because treatment during pregnancy is still incredibly effective at preventing any of the harms to a developing fetus. Looking at the race and ethnicity distribution amongst people with congenital syphilis in 2014 to 2022. So the blue line is the race ethnicity breakdown of people who are pregnant in Oregon during that time frame, and the orange line is people pregnant associated with congenital syphilis case. So you can see disproportionately affecting Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander, Black and African American, and American Indian Alaska Native groups there. Next slide. So OHA did this review of the 100 about 140 congenital syphilis cases and looked at the risk factors in the mom for congenital syphilis. So 49 out of 133, or 37%, were houseless or unstably housed. That includes incarceration, moving homes, residing in a substance use disorder treatment facility or group during pregnancy. The criminal justice involvement has a lower total number because they looked at a shorter period of time. That's where the 133 versus 96 cases. But of 96 that they looked at, 64% had criminal justice involvement, and 18% had been involved in criminal justice in the last 12 months prior to their syphilis diagnosis. Next slide. A significant number of people who were associated with congenital syphilis case had substance use history, injection drug use, methamphetamine use, and heroin and opioid use. HIV, STIs, and Hep C. So most patients had one male sex partner in the prior year. None were known to be living with HIV. Just under half had had a history of chlamydia or gonorrhea, which are other sexually transmitted infections. 14% had hepatitis C. So not as large of a association as some of the other things. Next slide. And then there was a deep dive into where there were potential points to prevent congenital syphilis. Again, if you have a diagnosis of syphilis in pregnancy and you treat it, you can prevent the fetus from being affected. So in these 133 cases, 41 of them had no prenatal care whatsoever. 20 of them had no timely prenatal care, meaning they presented for some prenatal care, but either didn't have it consistently or presented late in pregnancy. 18 of them were not tested for syphilis appropriately. And then 54, or the majority of them, had a test for syphilis but did not get adequate treatment. So that can be for two main reasons. One is the diagnosis is made too close to delivery, and there's not time for adequate treatment before the baby is born. But many of them were individuals who had maybe been to an emergency room and I had a blood draw there and it came back positive for syphilis, but we were unable to locate that case in order to treat them. So some knowledge that there was a person out there pregnant with syphilis, but did not get treatment for a number of reasons. And I really appreciate Heather mentioned earlier the congenital syphilis cases averted in Deschutes County. That really is cases that we ensure get adequate treatment, which takes immense public health resources, but the return on investment is also immense because congenital syphilis cases are need a lot of medical care. Next slide. So what's the public health approach? What is governmental public health doing? It's been several years ago now that Oregon Health Authority changed the screening guidelines to screen all sexually active people under the age of 45 at least once in their life, regardless of any other risk factors, and screen all pregnant people at 3 points during their pregnancy. When they first come to prenatal care, early in the third trimester, and at delivery, because there were a number of people being screened just when they established care and then not again, and they developed syphilis during pregnancy and it was not caught. So now 3 times during every pregnancy, people should be tested for syphilis. Encouraging opt-out screening in emergency departments and urgent cares. And we in Clackamas are really working to try to see if we can get point of care testing out a little bit more, where you have that result while the person is there with you. Most blood tests take 2 or 3 days to return. And at that point, if you don't know where that person is and we can't find them, that is a huge missed opportunity. And we are working also, I know OHA, I know all sorts of local public health authorities are working with urgent care and EDs and other health systems to try to increase our knowledge of how to find people, right? If you're testing somebody for syphilis, having a knowledge of how to get the result to them and where to find them so that we can get treatment, there's a lot of work that needs to go into making that kind of a systemic norm to be able to have better follow-up. Next slide. Some other things that have been done by OHA and primarily over the last 10 years, multiple Dear Provider letters to try to inform healthcare providers about syphilis and the resurgence and congenital syphilis. There was a syphilis summit in 2017 where we tried to strategize on how to address this from a public health approach. CD summaries are educational bulletins from OHA. Health alerts go to providers who are signed up for health alerts. There's been some surveying of providers from OHA and sort of direct outreach to providers that to increase screening practices. A lot of presentations like this, a lot of case review boards with local public health authorities, and a lot of provider training. I did a provider training yesterday. I'm doing a provider training next Tuesday. May 22nd, we have a provider training hosted through Clackamas County. If you guys want to know about that, we can get that word out for you. And then DoxyPEP is taking a dose of doxycycline after unprotected sex decreases your chance of getting syphilis. So it's sort of like a HIV PrEP or post-exposure prophylaxis. If you think that you might have been exposed to syphilis, take an antibiotic and it decreases the risk. So we're trying to get word out about that to healthcare providers. Next slide. The Bicillin Access Program. Bicillin is the brand name for the long-acting benzathine penicillin that is an injectable form of penicillin. that is not carried by all medical providers, but we want to make sure that everybody has access to it. So you can call your local public health authority if you have somebody with syphilis, and we'll drive over some penicillin to you. Incentive programs to engage pregnant patients to get screening, get treatment, and to make prenatal care visits. And then some special needs funding has been incredibly helpful to have short-term housing, but we really are out of all of our special needs funding in the current state of LPHA funding at this point. Next slide. I did want to point out a project working to prevent congenital syphilis in Clackamas County. So Clackamas County took some of the modernization money that we were given and had internal grant applications. So staff could apply for a grant to use modernization money for a project. And this was a project done through the partnership of the program planners for our communicable disease team and our maternal child health teams working together. So it was a really, really cool partnership within Clackamas County Public Health. Next slide. Protecting Futures is building toolkits, one for medical clinical providers with more information directly on screening and treatment, as well as access to media that they can use in their clinic to increase education for their patients about syphilis being around and that it can affect babies. And then a toolkit for non-clinical partners, so our community-based organizations that we work with, our food banks, and even law enforcement about how to talk about syphilis with your clients, how to destigmatize it and know that, and just be able to spread information about it being in the community. And we're having resources for testing and treatment. We are working on bringing point-of-care testing out with our public health van to other community events, like our we have a group that does laundry events, and we're bringing point-of-care syphilis testing to events like that. Next slide. This program also did three focus groups. One focus group was on clinical providers, which includes social workers and nurses and medical doctors. A group of women who had been pregnant, and a group of women experiencing houselessness, and a group of women experiencing substance use. And the key takeaways was that awareness of syphilis is low. Most participants, even in the provider group, had minimal knowledge about syphilis and congenital syphilis and the challenges. Healthcare can be a low priority when you're dealing with housing and active use cycles. Many people getting healthcare is not the main objective, and they seek care only when absolutely necessary and from emergency rooms. The accessibility and shame are huge issues. So accessibility to transportation, cost, and stigma are risk factors for people accessing healthcare. One, you can't get there. Two, they're concerned that you get there and they are treated poorly for being a pregnant person who may not be taking care of themselves. A lot of othering. A lot of people don't feel like they can be at risk for syphilis. That's something that other people get because it's pretty rare. And that language really matters. So participants in focus groups noted that the way certain messages are stated feel aggressive, judgmental, and evoke shame. Like, you should take care of yourself and your baby is not the way to actually talk and have a conversation with somebody. Next slide. So that is an overview of syphilis, what's happening in Oregon, and we can go ahead and stop sharing for a sec, Veronica. And what we are doing locally, and I'd love to have any thoughts or comments or reflections on how we can take syphilis prevention outside of local governmental public health. Thank you. Was that interesting?
Great. That was really interesting. Thank you.
Did you learn something, Veronica?
Veronica Irvin. Yes, I did. Veronica's now on the call. I did. Yeah, it was very interesting. Thank you. So can I start with like a naive question? Because it's an area. How does local public health interact with the healthcare system with syphilis? Like, where are the touch points? Where are people? I don't know. I'm curious on how that works or isn't working as well.
Yeah, and Bob mentioned that they're doing much the same in Douglas County, and I encourage others to pipe in too. I know I've been doing, provider education um, talks recently, and so many medical providers do not know the services that public health has. They don't know that we have, historic test results from most people. They don't know that we have outreach opportunities to bring treatment to people if we need it, and that sort of case management approach. Um, Heather says providers often rely on us for treatment, but um, there's a lot of work to be done to build those partnerships. So like I said, in Clackamas, we're working really hard on it, and we're trying to meet with emergency room providers. But um, and I have also personally attempted some like case reviews of poor outcome situations, but I haven't gotten a lot of feedback necessarily on people wanting to do that. It's one of those, we do our best, but the communications are not ideal. Yeah, Dean.
Yeah, thank you for doing this, Sarah, and I think very interesting. I think to play off on the provider piece a little bit and then to give my philosophical musings for a second. I think, we still have work to do with our providers and educating them and the need to screen at three different times. The problem is for many of these people, they're not interacting regularly with the healthcare system, and if they do have interactions, it is more likely an intermittent piece and maybe an ED piece. So it's not like we can do what we normally would do during pregnancy is let's educate our OB providers and the need to do this and pick up on this because this isn't where many of these people are seeking care because they're not seeking care. And so my philosophical musing, and it's hard, is how do we get to these people? Who are the people who interact with them? Whether it's social service folks who are doing housing or substance use folks, because there's a lot of overlap with substance use and housing and kind of trading housing for substances. Not in all of these women, but where trying to find who they interact with, and then get them to add this to a long list of things that they're already saying. Oh, I've got to address these 20 things with this person because it may be the only interaction they have. And I think that's what's really frustrating about this is these aren't like missed opportunities in OB clinics. These are missed opportunities in life because the systems are so fragmented. So thank you for letting me
No, I
rant
think you
on.
put that really well. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dean. Any other thoughts on other partners that we could engage?
Um, Hi, my name is Jenny Withicum. I'm in charge of health and physical education for Portland Public Schools. And I don't know whether this is a possibility or not, but so we provide pretty robust, comprehensive sexuality education, and we talk about STI transmission. Um, the only the only content that students can be opted out of is comprehensive sexuality education, specifically STIs. And depending on who you ask, the entire unit, which for middle and high school students could span 2-3 weeks. Um, I continue to fight this that, I don't support opt-outs of comprehensive sex ed. Now I follow them because that is state law, and of course that is my job. But I guess I continue to wonder um, what we can do at the educational level to ensure that comprehensive sex ed is taught. I work with a lot of other districts in the state who just flat out don't do it, even though they are required to report on their Division 22 that they are compliant. Um, and they don't have a person at the central office who's ensuring that they do it. And so, yeah, I guess that can because it's it's the space to start the conversation with a lot of our young people. And I just wonder what if there's a there. And I could go into all the things we come across with regards to training and just getting the education out to our students and young people, condom availability programs, all of it. But yeah, that's just something I've been continuing to think on. And I'll just end with this. We have it's kind of a gray area. Opt-outs are very much a gray area in public education. So there's a couple of conflicting administrative rules at ODE. And so we've taken in PPS, we've taken a more, I guess, we haven't allowed as much opt-out as probably other districts have, because we're taking a stricter view of the rules. However, just recently, due to kind of like the federal landscape, the superintendent of public schools said that we must allow a complete opt-out of anything that would be found in our comprehensive sexuality education plan. And that's everything from naming body parts to child sexual abuse. That's all of it. And, we know the rates of child abuse, child sexual abuse, who's most likely to perpetrate, et cetera. And so we're going to have to actually change our opt-outs next year to allow full opt-out, where before we were able to kind of piecemeal it a little bit, and it opened opportunities for us to have conversations with families about what sex ed really is. So I don't know if there's a there, or anything that our group can do, but that's just something that we are constantly facing in the public school system.
Thank you, Jenny. I just learned a lot from you. I had some ideas of like, I wonder if LPHAs should, talk to their districts and see what they're doing, but kind of like our funding discussion at the beginning, there's so many unknowns, it's hard to know. But we can think about what we can plan for in 6 months when we may know more things, right? So that is really helpful. Thank you. We are running close on time. Anybody else want to say? I can talk about syphilis forever, so you guys might need to stop me. Any other thoughts or comments? You let me know if you want to talk syphilis more. Veronica Herrera, would you facilitate any public comment, please?
Sure. Is there anyone joining from the public that would like to comment? We did not receive any written comments. So if there's no one that joined, we can move forward.
Thanks. Okay, so agenda for next month, update from State Health Improvement Plan team on our final priorities. The steering committee will be meeting at the end of May to make decisions based on community feedback. We will also hear updates from the Public Health Workforce Work Group. Congratulations to them on finishing that report. That's amazing. And the Health Equity Framework Work Group also. And we'll continue to discuss legislative session, review public health accountability metrics report, hear about proposed work plan for the Preventive Health and Health Services Block Grant. So it's going to be a packed June. But I like these sort of member-led health topic roundtable, what's going on in your organization. I hope you guys too. If anybody wants to lead our next one, then please let Veronica know, or you can raise your hand right now, but we don't have very many people left. Bob, are you raising your hand? No, that's fine. That's fine. Any other agenda items or any thoughts on that before we close?
I would just say you have two Veronicas now, so
I
let
know.
Veronica Herrera know.
Yes, let Veronica Herrera. Naomi, do you want to say something?
I was just gonna add at the beginning, we said what we were hoping to leave with, and I am definitely leaving energized and inspired. So thank you.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. With that, let's go enjoy some sunshine.